This rally was something else, but now he goes on to Eloy, the place he's been, I dare I say it, he has been foreshadowing. This section is called So Happy to Be in Safety. To address the trumpeter's arguments, I would now like to invite you through the three gates of ICE's Eloy Detention Center, then past the main security man and to his metal detector. My Butchers of America cap needed to be locked up because red, white, and blue might, as the security man explained, incorporate gang colors. Having passed my scan, I stood behind his workstation waiting for the interpreter who had to run back out to the parking lot to verify the rental car's license plate number so that I had full opportunity to admire the two charity-purposed vending machines. One sold phone credits, and when I asked the first interviewee, Eulalia, which gift would best delight her, she chose that one, both of us being ignorant that international calls were prohibited. A Harper's Magazine fact checker found out that they weren't. Since all these detainees were from elsewhere, phone credit would avail her about as much as the security man's hypothetical good wishes. That turns out not necessarily to be true. He was actually a convivial sort who cracked jokes with incoming guards, and while I waited the interpreter's return, we even carried on a conversation about the weather, the faraway end of his shift, and the famous Indian ruins of Casa Grande. They were a quarter-hour's drive away, and he had never been there. The other vending machine sold commissary credits, at least that was what I thought he said. But at the end of the two interviews, when they let us out of there, the interpreter successfully masking her angry grief, I was told that the only method of contributing to a detainee's account was via that reliable old gouging service, Western Union. So that was what Eulalia would get. Western Union took a smaller bite if one sent the money electronically than if one walked into their office, so I gave the interpreter a $100 bill, and she contributed $100 of her own, then did something on the computer. Eulalia, therefore, would theoretically eventually win $90, although I wonder what she made of my apparent breach of promise to give her the wherewithal to telephone her home country. Well, why dwell on bad things, especially when they happened to other people? I myself had much to praise Providence about. For one thing, nobody searched my anus that day. The U.S. government has done that only once in my life, back in my hitchhiking days, so I should have gotten over it, but for some reason I hold a grudge. Better yet, not only did they let us in, they did, I reiterate, let us out. And so we were smoothly promoted from the security man's domain into the shiny, clean white room behind, and to the right of it, complete with two mirror panes, a soda machine, a snack machine, and a regiment of molded foam chairs, seamless and crackless, you see, so that nobody could hide contraband in them. I also noted a line of restrooms and a small TV that was broadcasting an unwatched thriller. So there we now were, in one of I don't know how many windowless side rooms, ensconced in two of the chairs in that row on one side of the wooden partition. Right away, they brought in Eulalia, who sat down in one of the chairs on the other side. There was no transparent wall between us, Eloy's security flavor being officially minimum, nor did any guard stand listening. For all I knew, the room wasn't even bugged. The interview arrangement procedure had been as follows. One could hardly just wander in, as I used to do in Mexico, and ask a guard whether any captives felt like talking. Oh no, that would never be consonant with border security. Therefore, to keep you and me safe, one had to first to inquire of an immigration lawyer whether any detained clients felt willing. If yes, one had to order up these persons by name and alien number. The third step was to be approved by ICE. Next, ICE required verification of the media outlet under whose auspices I was going to have this pleasure. My editor at Harper's vouched for us expeditiously. The final step was to, and here's the center, by the way, find the place, 1705 East Hannah Road, in Eloy. So we drove to that town, but at the convenience store they didn't know anything about it and seemed almost uncomfortable that I had asked in front of the customers. Or maybe its existence depressed them since they were all Latinos. Finally, a lady in the back directed us to return south to the previous town, then drive east, at which point the detention center lay alone off a long, flat, sandy stretch, being a long, pale, rectangular block of slit-windowed nastiness, behind a fence less impressive than the border wall, but hardly welcoming. Now back to Eulalia. She was tiny, with bright black eyes and a long braid, and projected a flat effect in keeping with that ugly room in that hateful place. The interpreter, who was a linguist by profession, with special qualifications both academic and practical in Mesoamerican tongues, informed me that her Spanish was mostly excellent, although she could not conjugate certain verbs, her native language being a Mayan one called Canjobal. She had been educated up to the third grade. Her home was the little pueblo of Santa Eulalia, near the large city of Huehuetenango. There's a note here. I presume that she was named after not the town, but the saint, whose gruesome martyrdom figures in one of Federico Garcia Lorca's great poems. They had dressed her in orange. What made you decide to leave Guatemala? I asked. Quote, I left because there were some very, very bad men, and my mama said our father had left when I was little, so I had no protection. These guys kept trying to take me away with them, and when I refused, they threatened to kill me, so I ran away to a ranch. I didn't know them, they were just crazy, close quote. What did your mama say? Quote, the last time they bothered me, I was walking down the street with my mama. They said they would kill my mama, close quote. And then, quote, so we both decided to leave. We decided that I would leave first because I was in the worst danger and causing danger to my mama. I left on June 25th. Another sad detail, Eulalia could not simply state that her father had abandoned them. She must have never known him, since she needed to take her mother's word for it. I met her not quite 8 months later. This was on February 13th. So I left on June 25th, and this was on February 13th of 2019. That was June 25th of last year. Our plan was that I would find safety and then meet her because she cannot read or write or use the telephone. Thus, my consolation for failing to buy her international phone privileges. Her mother couldn't have talked with her anyway. Quote, a neighbor lady, said Eulalia, nodding her head and speaking softly and rapidly, quote, was to take Mama to some ranch, and I could plan succeed. I have a relative here in Arizona who could contact her. Mama's at that ranch. So, and so, after all, I requested. How did you cross into Mexico? I asked. I had always heard of the United States where there was safety. I met an old lady who was trying to get work. So I traveled with her on a bus, and when I woke up on the bus, the old lady was gone, close quote. And this was in Mexico? Quote, yes. I don't know how many days I was on the road in Mexico. When I woke up, I got off at the stop and started walking north, close quote, with that bright or actually desperate innocence that had impelled Samuel, who said, quote, it was like, we're going for it, and we just crossed, close quote. And Antonia, who said to, quote, just keep going north and you'll find the wall, close quote. It is only now when I transcribe this that tears come to my eyes. What might have been the duration of her journey? In Father Sean's migrant center in Nogales, I met Martin from Guatemala. It took him 25 days to reach the border, walking partway, hitchhiking, riding buses when he had to. At night, he'd ask for shelter, quote, and some were really nice, close quote, he said. Let's suppose it was like that for Eulalia. There would have been unknowable cities, strange roads, and maybe more bad men, cold nights, and the curving half-silhouetted tridents of saguaros rising from the brush like mutant phalli, sprung erect from wiry pubic hair, and finally the border. Quote, then suddenly I saw some policemen wearing the same coat as you. My jacket was dark green. And they grabbed me, close quote. Was there any wall? Quote, no, only rocks like this. She pointed to the wall, that you could crawl through, close quote. By now, I knew it would be fruitless to ask her where she had crossed. How would she know? Had there been mountains, mafias, a river, or the hairy discs of prickly pears shining in the sun? You may remember that on our eastward safari along the wall's Arizona side, a border patrolman had told the fixer that after merely 2 more magnificent dips, this structure of metal plates and high dark poles and concertina wire finally gave way to the much less forbidding Normandy fencing. It might have been here that Eulalia had crossed, or for that matter, Antonia. How far did the wall go? I wish I knew. According to the Quail Creek Republicans, it most certainly did not go far enough. Audience question: is there a specific place in Arizona that you have in mind to build the wall? Is there a specific place that you think needs it more than any other? Because we have a huge unprotected border, a couple of strands of barbed wire, close quote. Brian Colfage, the triple amputee vet who started the GoFundMe. The issue with Arizona, this is quote from Brian, quote, the issue with Arizona is there's very few private property landowners. A lot of land is federal or state, so we can't touch it. What we're doing is working with private property landowners. We have narrowed it down to a select few zones. We don't want to basically we can't go public with the information exactly because there are groups, different liberal groups who want to attack it and want to do everything to stop it, and we're not ready to release that. But I can tell you that we have selected various areas in Arizona to build this wall, close quote. Fortunately, their border protection had succeeded sufficiently to catch that criminal called Eulalia. I asked her, what was the first thing these policemen said? Quote, they didn't ask me anything at all, just name, date of birth, country. I had my Guatemalan ID, and I gave it to them. Close quote. How old are you? Quote, I will turn 24 soon, on October 28th. After you were arrested, what occurred? They put, quote, these quotes are making it very annoying, sorry. I'm just going to not quote him. I'm just going to ask his questions. It'll be easier. They put me in a white car. This is Eulalia. Quote, they put me in a white car for an hour. For a while, they just left me there alone, sitting. Then they took me away with 4 other people. Close quote. Where did they take you? Quote, to the cold cell. We were mothers, children, young and old, maybe 10 of us. We couldn't sleep. Close quote. Why is it cold? Quote, I don't know what the reasoning could be. Close quote. For 4 days, they kept Eulalia there. Then they took her, quote, somewhere else, I don't know where, then here. Close quote. How many people in your cell now? Quote, they call them tanks, 50 people in each one, all women. How well do you get along? Quote, sometimes other women argue, but I am so happy to be in safety that I am happy. Close quote. The trumpeter swans would have been disappointed to hear that. Even after the cold cell, with indefinite detention ahead of her, Eulalia considered herself better off. I guess they should have tightened the screws. He asked her, how long do you think you'll be here? Well, there are groups fighting to get us our freedom, but it's up to the judge or governor. 22. This word suggests that her conception of the American legal system was informed by the Guatemalan or Mexican one. Who will decide how many years I have to stay here? I don't have a lawyer, no money. My relative in the state can't get any more money. Close quote. Months or years, whatever it took to protect the border from trespassers like her. Send her back. Let those men rape her and kill her mother. Why was that our American problem? But one utterance at the rally in Green Valley did make me wonder about consistency. Do you remember the trumpeter Darby who had fumed about, quote, the amount of money that it's going to cost you in the long term to educate those people and to provide health care, close quote? That was, of course, what exercised the trumpeters far more than how much the cartels hypothetically profited in some other country. That their argument was precarious as well as ungenerous may be easily seen. How does an illegal alien get work in the United States? He or she presents a false social security number. I have interviewed and photographed illegal farm workers holding up their pay stubs. Their social security fees get deducted. They will never collect social security income in their old age. They are not robbing us, but themselves. Surely this must go far to offset the cost of their educations and health care. Now, what about the expense incarcerating them? Eulalia had been cooling her heels in Eloy for something like 8 months, with an unknown stretch ahead of her. I would love the Quail Creek Country Club to assess that cost. Next time, a cameo about Juan.